Sari Cooper is a highly respected ASEX certified sex therapist and clinical supervisor with over 25 years' experience dedicated to helping individuals and couples build authentic, emotional, and sexual relationships. As the director of the Center for Love and Sex in New York City, she leads a team specializing in a wide range of intimacy and sexual health concerns, from desire discrepancies to navigating diverse relationship structures. Sara's unique therapeutic approach integrates various modalities, including psychoanalytic, family systems, CBT, and somatic therapies, and notably draws from her interesting background as a professional dancer and choreographer to foster embodied erotic connection. Beyond her clinical practice, as if there's time for anything else, Sari is a prolific writer, media expert, and frequent presenter at international conferences and workshops. She's deeply committed to advancing the field by training other therapists, which is something that's so important, empowering them to address sexual intimate issues more effectively, including through a certification training called the See It program, which aims to enhance therapists and coaches' clinical skills and helping clients deal with their erotic sexual intimacy challenges. Gosh, there's a lot there. So my first thing is very much you're very welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today from New York. It's really, really kind of you to spare the time. I wanted to ask firstly, is what your background is, your formative years, and can you draw a line from who you were then to what you're doing now, this calling and focus you have on this particular sector?
Yes. So I always say to people that it was a very organic process. I grew up in Canada. I grew up the youngest of six. And in my family, even though it was a liberal family, there were things that weren't spoken about. And so my eldest brother suffered from schizophrenia, and he was much older than me. And so I saw his psychosis, like full frontal psychosis, in my presence as a very young child, which was both frightening and illuminating at the same time. And so we were directed by our parents not to discuss our our brother's illness. And so I learned from a very young age about sort of keeping up appearances and keeping
Mm.
things secretive, and also living through a very painful experience of witnessing how he was treated, how he was treated badly by one parent and not the other. So I think when you have those very formative experiences that have to do with mental health and mental illness, I think it does leave a very, charged stamp on any person. And some people will say, I'm not having anything to do with that. And other people are drawn to it. And then fast forward, I actually was a dancer, a modern dancer. And unlike dancers who start their training with ballet as young people, especially young girls, I started with creative movement. Now, creative movement was all about improvisation. And I remember one in particular, like imagine you're an egg and you're going to the frying pan, and then you start getting sizzled, and then you get tossed over, and all of that at a very young age of 5 taught me, even though I may have had, you know, gifts, given gifts to me,
Mm.
but that was training on embodiment.
Mhm.
And so from a very young age, I was very embodied. I fell in love with modern dance. I always identified as a modern dancer, even when I was taking ballet all those years. And I came to New York to study at the Juilliard School, majored in dance, went on to perform with, major modern dance companies, as well as doing my own work. And when it came time for me to transition, I always was very interested in dance therapy. Actually, I thought I was going to go that direction. I discovered social work school, and I discovered systemic family and couples therapy. And for me, that was fantastic because the training for a couples therapy is behind a one-way mirror. And
Okay.
so one therapist is doing an actual session, and
Yeah.
the team is behind the one-way mirror watching and noticing all this nonverbal as well as verbal
Yeah. Yeah.
communication. And then the team leader calls in to the therapist saying, part of our team is thinking that so and so is feeling hurt and lost. Another team member feels that this parent is actually being excluded from the conversation. So it was, if you think about it, it's really an incarnation of what is now, I think, called internal family systems, but in the space of family systemic therapy,
Mm.
that everyone is expressing a different side of the same issue. So that was my goal when I transitioned out of dance, and but both in my social work training, which is my graduate training, and when I went on to the Ackerman Institute, which was my couple systemic therapy, no one talked about sex. Now, as a dancer, a modern dancer, mind you, in downtown New York, where sex was discussed quite a bit, it seemed to me strange that you're studying couples therapy and no one is training you to talk about sexuality, which seems like such a major part of a person's identity, their life.
Yeah, definitely.
So when I finally had a few cases in my practice where a partner was talking about low desire or erectile disorder, I didn't want to assume that it was a psychogenic or a relational issue, which is what most therapists will or have been trained to assess.
Hmm.
And certainly contributors to low desire are a lot of antidepressants, so that they will think about, but they won't think about other issues and they won't ask. And so I realized I'd come up against one of my walls. Every part of my life, I come up against the wall of like, I don't know this. I need to know it, but I don't know it. And seeking out training for someone who could teach me. And so I went to a conference. There was a presentation by a sex therapist. I went up to her. I said, I need your help. I need your supervision. And lo and behold, I discovered the whole field of sex therapy and the whole, that of research and training. And so I became an ASEX certified sex therapist and supervisor. So that's the long winded answer, but it is an organic thread, which is
Yeah.
when you don't know something and you know enough to know that you don't know it, go out and get the knowledge from someone who does.
Mm.
And so, which is why my mission has been to train general therapists. And the reason why we created the Erotic Intimacy Academy to train general therapists and coaches, by the way, is if you don't know enough about the particular issue your client is having, you won't know what questions to ask and you won't know what follow-up questions to ask. And so because therapists don't ask right off the bat, how's your sex life, which is what I started asking my clients,
It's quite
they
quite a
won't
direct question.
they won't see it, which is why the name of the certification is the See It certification. If you don't ask, you won't see it. And it stands
Yeah.
for Sexuality Educated and Erotically Informed Therapist or Coach. Yeah.
It's kind of like if I guess if you're a general practitioner, doctor, and you're not trained on, sounds stupid, arms, right? We're going to treat everything, but I don't know about arms. But I know you've got pain there, but it must be something else. It just is almost that weird thing. So when you decided to start the See It program, what sort of response did you get when you talk to therapists about here's something that might fill in the gaps that you have?
Well, people, I think therapists are really thirsty for this
Mhm.
knowledge because they don't, they get stuck. They're like, we've covered the trauma of their childhood, we've covered the problems they're having with their spouse or partner, and they're still having trouble, or they still aren't engaged in sex. They're not interested. And I'm not sure what it is. And I said, well, have you asked them if they're having pain? Have you asked them if their erections are being maintained? Have you ever asked them if they've ever had an injury to their genital region? No. I'm like, well, those are really important questions to ask. Have you asked them about whether they've had now I'm going to use this phrase just so you know. I Have you ever asked them if they've ever had boundary crossings? And they'll look at me just like my clients will go, "Huh?" Now, if you and so let's just put that first aside for a second. If you
Mhm.
ask a client, "Have you ever been sexually abused?" Now, some of them will say, "Yes, I have." Um, but some of them will say no. And the problem there is that there are many people, including many men, by the way, who've had experiences that are non consensual, that are actual boundary crossings, but that they don't put in the bucket of having been a sexual trauma or sexual abuse survivor.
Yeah.
And so that therapist will never hear that story. But what I say to clients is a boundary crossing is where you have had an experience where either someone has touched you, looked at you, made a comment that crossed a boundary of your sense of privacy and self and agency that made you feel really icky.
Mm.
Now, that's different than someone coming on to you, you know, at a party and you say
Yeah. Yeah.
no and they leave you. That's not a boundary crossing because you said no. They've
No.
respected the boundary, they've left, right? And so there are people who've had many experiences like that. And when you define the term boundary crossing, they get it. But most therapists will not be asking that question.
And what form does the education of the therapist take? How do you engage them, and how do you train them, and what is it that they see and feel differently once they've been through the program?
So each month we do a recorded webinar that contains evidence based, like research based, as well as clinical experience around a particular topic or problem. So one month we'll be studying erectile disorder, one month we'll be studying infidelity, one month we'll be studying, you know, uh, different desires that may not fit within uh, a heterosexual model, but people don't necessarily label it otherwise, like queer or gay or
Yeah.
lesbian
Yeah.
or anything. So that's this month's topic. And so in that hour and a half webinar, we put in a lot of deep knowledge.
Hmm.
We give case examples of what we're trying to describe, like our approach and how we clinically approach it. There are readings that are up to date, readings that really inform the students. And then at the end of the month, so we drop that, they have access to it at the beginning of the month. It's almost like a book club. And then, and they watch it. And then at the end of the month, we do a live virtual case consultation, meaning one of the people in the group, in our cohort of students, will bring in a case on that theme and they'll give a history of the case, they'll explain what they've done thus far, and then they'll tell us where they're stuck. And
Yeah.
that's a beautiful way of learning. It's similar to my background in systemic therapy, because they're not only hearing from me and my co-founder Kelly, who's also an ASEX certified sex therapist, but they're hearing from the group. And again, they're getting all these different angles and reflections and feedback and questions that they might have for this case that the therapist hadn't considered. It's,
That sounds so powerful, Wendy. I think that the huge value in it is that there's that group dynamic and there's that interaction, interplay, connection, all those things that rather than having that sort of, I don't know, very rigid one-on-one or book learning, whatever. When you're sort of hearing it, and I'm sure a lot of people when they get to the sort of case study at the end, think, "Oh, I've had something like that. Oh gosh, yeah, my clients are saying that." But I think maybe one of the things that a lot of maybe general therapists, and this is a generalization, do you think they feel sort of hesitant or initially ill-equipped to delve into clients' sexual concerns? Because I know it is part of the sort of holistic body and mind and everything, but do they almost have this fear of opening this can of worms for not knowing what to do with it once it's open? When one partner says, "Oh, I've our sex drive has gone completely. I never want to have sex," and the other partner saying, "Well, my sex drive has gone up. I want to have sex 4 times a week." They sort of think, "Oh, okay, what do I do with this?" And is that what the CE program almost helps them with? The well, here's what you do with it.
Right. So
Okay.
therapists are brought up in the same culture that their clients are a lot
Yeah,
of times.
absolutely.
Although we do, in New York, we have people who come from all sorts of countries, and I also do sex esteem coaching from people all around the world. So each culture has its own messages, right? But
Mhm.
all in all, to say that therapists also feel shame. They also feel like it's a taboo. They also have been trained to feel like that you're following the lead of the client. If the client doesn't bring it up, you shouldn't.
Yeah.
And they also feel like embarrassed, like to say certain words, even to say clitoris, to say testicles, to say shaft. I mean, those are actual anatomical parts of the body. But just like most parents don't teach their kids those words about
Mhm.
parts of their body, um, therapists feel like it's intrusive. But actually, the reaction that clients have is this big sigh of relief,
Yeah.
because if the therapist can say it, oh my God, now I've just been given permission to talk about my concerns. Now, I'm quite well educated about a lot of things that are medical and biological in nature, but there are things I don't know. And so when someone presents me something new that I don't know, again, I've like come up against my knowledge, I'll say, that's an excellent question. And I'm going to go to the hive mind because I don't know this answer, but I'm part of organizations with
Yeah.
doctors who are specialists who have been well trained in sexual health and sexual pleasure and sexual disorders. I'm going to get you an answer, because most people have gone to, if they're having medical issues that haven't been treated, are going to doctors who haven't had much training in sexual health, feel uncomfortable themselves asking those questions. And sometimes people are having issues for years,
Oh
including,
gosh, yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Hmm.
I think one of the things is often when we go and see a medical professional about something that we think is physically wrong or not working as we might, well, we typically go to that appointment by ourselves, and so there's no, I guess, the doctor, and you can't blame the doctors in a way because they're not seeing the context within which it fits. But if you have a couple that are going and then they sort of talk about the broader context, but I think it's a human trait. So I was brought up Catholic. And whenever you go to confession, well, I certainly do. You start with the small things, and you sort of eventually build up. But generally, by the time you said a few small things like, "Oh, I lied," or "I did this," or whatever, and priests will typically absolve you before you get to the big stuff. And I think it's a bit like therapy. You sort of go in there. You're not going to go in there and then sort of launch into, right, this is the big thing. And if a therapist doesn't prompt you, you end up just focusing on the small things. So I think that's the thing is because if somebody does ask you a direct question,
Mm.
I think people are quite comfortable answering a direct question. It's when there's that sort of, but is there anything else? And oh gosh, how do I say this? I've never said this out loud before, and I'm not sure what's going to feel like. So that's, yeah. I mean, we talked about it a little bit before. It's how do you create that safe space for people to admit something in public for the first time, or say it out loud for the first time, or, and that's one of the challenges I was thinking in a long-term relationship. A long-term could be 6 months, it could be 40 years, is that I think typically, I think couples don't tend to sit down once a week and say, so what's changed in the last week? Have your desires changed? Has your expectation changed? Whatever. We sort of, we get into our sexual routine quite early on in the relationship normally, and then 25 years later, we're thinking, yeah, I never really liked that. Or I really wish I could do this. But you think, oh, I've never said it. How do I have that conversation? And that's one of the things I think that sex therapy could be very helpful for is almost almost giving that feeling that it is completely appropriate and safe and needed to have this conversation. Is that does that make sense? I'm not really a question there, but just me
No,
babbling.
it's a beautiful reflection on what we do. And so let me go back to the beginning, which I think you
Mm,
had this question of like, how do you make someone feel safe enough to trust you
mm,
with the most intimate information? Yes, direct questions help. And but I also tell my clients I'm a very transparent therapist. So I'm not doing anything with, smokes and mirrors. If I ask you a question, I'm going to explain to you why I'm asking that question. So I give you context, and then you can decide whether you want to tell me or not. So
mm,
there's a consent there. You're opting in. You don't have to answer the question.
mm,
In fact, I had someone today say, I said, are there things about this that you know you you would like to share in this session? And they said, no, I'd rather not. And I prefaced it with, sometimes people want to share certain like fantasies with their partner, and sometimes they don't, and it's totally up to you.
mm.
It's a choice. And given that whole context, the client felt safe to say, no, I don't want to share that, that's fine. Right now, might be something for discussion, but at least I'm modeling for them that consent is also inhabiting the safe space of therapy.
Mm,
The other way I think that is important to say, because I do practice somatic sex therapy,
mhm,
is a lot of people don't have words for what they want and what they feel. That includes emotional experiences. And so to be able to check in with someone and say, so what are you aware? I noticed something just shifted in your body. Like,
mm.
can you describe if you're having some sensations? Would you like to share what's going on? Because I have a feeling you might be experiencing something, but you don't really have the words for it. Well, yes, actually. Where are you feeling it? In my stomach. Can you describe the kind of sensation it is? So I'll ask that first. And if they don't have the words for it, I'll say, so I'm going to give you kind of a menu. Is it tingly? Is it tight? Is it scratchy? Is it hardened? Is it feel like a pit? And these are just a menu. You don't have to choose them, but those are some of the ways people describe the sensations that go on in their stomach in a therapy session. And they'll say, yeah, I feel like I have a pit in my stomach. It feels like a big hole. And then we'll go into that some more. And then once they feel embodied in the session and they can tell me what is going on with their body in the session, I have created a space that's safe enough for the client to be out of their head only and into their body and fully present. And that is actually therapeutic in as far as sex therapy goes, because many times people are not in their bodies. They're not fully embodied. They are in their head and they can't actually feel all the sensations that are coming in.
I really like that sort of almost guidance as to what to feel, because as you say, so a lot of us aren't that erudite. We haven't often thought about words to describe our feelings. It's just a feeling. So when somebody says, does it feel hard? Is it round? Is it soft? Is it spiky? Is it warm? Is it cold? You do understand what that means, and then I guess you express it a lot more clear. And I also think one of the for lots of societal reasons, when we're younger, I mean, sort of, before our teens, even when we first start to think about our bodies as more than just the physical wrapping we come in, we we're certainly not encouraged to explore our own bodies. So masturbation is often, you'll go blind if you keep doing that, or get your hand out of there, that's dirty, all those things. So, and I think we carry that through into our sexual journey with partners, and you think, well, if you really don't understand your own desires, feelings, sensations, etc., your body, how can you possibly verbalize what you want to somebody else, and you sort of stumble through really. And I think it's such a shame that people don't get the chance to actually, yeah, just explore and figure out what I do like my ankles being stroked. I do like my ears being pulled on. I've never thought of that. And it's it's crazy, isn't it? 'Cause we sort
It
of
is.
we yeah, because we think of our bodies and our sexual bodies as being our penis or our vulva, and that's sort of it. Maybe the breasts and maybe the butts, but then we don't think about the rest of the body, the scalp, the face, the cheeks, the neck, all those erogenous zones that we have, because we certainly never talked about them before. Never mentioned at school. It's certainly something our parents don't sit down and say, like, just go to your room for a few hours, just close your eyes, explore your own body. We won't disturb you. Well, my parents certainly didn't. it's the, so yeah. So how much do you think that plays into um, frustrations or questions people have in later life that they aren't necessarily comfortable with themselves?
I definitely that people grow up with certain religions,
Yep.
and certain cultural expectations, and they're taught quite early to feel ashamed of having a pleasurable experience, right? If you think about young toddlers, right, who are
Yeah.
touching their genitals, the
Yeah.
reactions of the adults around them is their first message that this
Mm.
is not to be done. I think nowadays more parents who are more informed might say that's to be done in private. But
Mm.
there's still this embarrassment reaction of like,
Yep.
ooh, or hoo, or boys will be boys, or you dirty little person, like
Yeah.
go to your room, right? Like all of those messages are the first inklings of how one is supposed to feel, not only about those private parts, but our bodies
Mm.
also, if you think about it, um, when I go back to what I said, when you omit the names of certain parts of your body when you're a child, this is my head, these are my eyes, this is my nose, this is my mouth. What's that?
Yeah.
Then they're given some sort of slang cutesy name, and they're not actually taught the whole structure of their genitalia. That whole omission is a message. That's
Yeah.
a huge message. You are not to be thinking about that part of your body, let alone touching it. And so we get people who have a lot of shame and a lot of distrust, even of their own body. It's supposed to function like a machine. And if it doesn't, something must be extremely wrong with me, or I'm messed up in my head about it. And they're not getting there's so it's a self-flagellation situation.
Mm.
Um, So we do what's called, in assessing a client, and this is part of our See It certification, a biopsychosocial, sexual, spiritual assessment, where we go deeply and ask about clients' first observations around affection or erotic touch or any sort of sensual experience they had as a child. And remember, a sensual experience does not have to be sexual in nature. And
Yeah.
so our first sensual experiences as children is having a bath, someone giving us a bath. That's touch, that's
Mhm.
water, that's sound. Maybe someone sang to us while we were having our nightly bath. Those are all senses. And if we were brought up feeling like good in our bodies because we could have all these sensual experiences, then you actually, what I do as a therapist or as a supervisor, I ask people to talk about those early sensual experiences. What did they enjoy before they immediately got into, oh, you know, unfair? No. And now, listen, to be honest, there are people who have not had much in the way of sensual nourishment. Their parents didn't hug them, they weren't kissed. They didn't have an experience early on with a partner because of maybe cultural or religious restrictions. So it is a foreign experience for them to consider that their body, I like to say the body is a landscape of desire and erotic pleasure. And unfortunately, many people either had it when they were young and then stoked it away once they became sexually active, or they never had it. or they had someone abuse them, and so it's not a safe place.
Mm. And I often think, and maybe this is particularly a male thing, that we have a view that sex is penetration. That is sex basically, and I think yeah, because we sort of, there's that thing when you're younger, a teenager or older, you sort of say, so have you had sex yet? Have you done it? And the slang will be, have you did you give it to her? Has she did you and it's all very, A, very possessive, and B, very physical act of penetrating somebody. And maybe we never learn that sex can be incredibly fulfilling and without penetration at all. I think that's maybe where some men struggle is as they get maybe older or stressed or whatever, and they might have an erectile dysfunction or a challenge at a particular time. So I think, well, that's it. My sex life is over because they've only ever thought of sex as being that an erect penis is what sex is about, and that isn't what it's about, is it?
No. So when I introduce the topic of sexuality, the
Mhm.
first thing I'll say is I'll say, I'm using sex in a different way probably than you are.
Yeah.
I'm using the word sexuality to talk about an umbrella. And under that umbrella are many behaviors, thoughts, fantasies that
Mhm.
people have that I regard as sex. And so, because the heteronormative society that we all live in has taught us lessons that heterosexual sex is the gold standard, it includes a hard, erect penis penetrating a vagina that is ready at all times. By the way, men also learn that they should be ready, willing, and able at all times to get that erection, which is also misguided. Um, that anything other than that, and by the way, the other part of heteronormative sexuality is that the woman is the gatekeeper of
Yeah.
that, of whether penetrative sex is going to happen. The other thing that's part of it is that a man goes into a heterosexual experience expecting to have an orgasm. A heterosexual woman does not. Why?
Yeah.
Because most likely they're not going to get it. Most likely a guy doesn't know what to do. Most likely the guy doesn't even ask, how would you like to be pleasured? Do you like to have an orgasm? And then let's bring it into the fold of what we call unlabeled desires, because there are many people who have fantasies, watch
Mm.
sexually explicit media, all about, same gender, group gender, all genders kind of sexuality, and they find it very erotic.
Mm.
However, they don't talk about that, they don't share that. So there are many experiences also involving the whole body, which is why I include tantra like exercises
Mhm.
in what I'm teaching my clients to try at home, and also inviting therapists that I'm training to learn for themselves, because I
Mm.
also feel like it's important to learn through your own body in order to be a good teacher and guide to your clients. And that includes exploring touch around your knees and your head, and what does it feel like to have someone tap your back with their fingernails? Like, that can be a very super expressive and super
Yeah.
enjoyable. Now, the other part of this whole penetrative model for heterosexuals, and I would even say for gay and queer folks, is that the expectation that penetration is going to happen is more likely in with gay men, queer men, and straight men. And
Mhm.
the reason why their partners might start to decline, even after an initial initiation of any sort of sexual experience, is because they know the equation is, if I opt in, this is not going to be necessarily about my pleasure, and it's going to include penetration, and I don't want penetration tonight. But they don't have the words to say, so nice that you're coming on to me. I think you're so hot. And tonight, this is all I'm interested in doing. Are you up for that? Again, consent, telling
Yeah.
them what my body is open to tonight, what I find erotically or sexually pleasing, asking the other person what they want, and then coming to some resolution.
Mm.
But that takes a lot of skills. And that's what we teach. We teach on how to teach clients how to have those very intricate conversations. Because in the regular world, it's very binary and it's a yes or a no. The other thing that most people don't know is, let's take the whole male, erection and orgasm model, is that as men get older, it's expected that they're going to have more difficulty attaining and maintaining erection. That's why the PDE5 inhibitor business, like Cialis, Viagra, whatever, is big business. However, what they don't realize that if their head isn't in the game and they're not
Yeah.
erotically turned on, it's not going to feel great, and they actually may lose their erection. But most doctors won't tell men that. The other thing they don't tell you is that you can actually have an orgasm without an ejaculation. And that's one of the things Tantra does teach. You can have immense pleasure and not necessarily have a hard penis, and you can not necessarily have an ejaculation. And men have a lot riding on those two things in terms of how they feel about their masculinity because of the culture we live in.
Definitely. And I thought it's really interesting when you said about about um, educating, guiding, talking to one partner or another to be able to communicate. Like, this is I feel turned on tonight, but I just want kissing and touching and holding, whatever. Because I think most, and let's keep it to men for a second. I think most men tend to have a move in bed. They think, "Oh, like this is my sort of this is my prequel to hopefully having sex." You might be stroke the wife's ear, or brush her hair, or rub her back, or whatever, and the wife or partner's laying there thinking, "Ah, okay." And sometimes the wife or partner will turn around and say, "Look, I'm just really tired tonight." Okay, and the guy doesn't necessarily hear, "Are you really tired? Yeah, I'll just give you a cuddle." The guy thinks, "Okay, she's turning me down. She doesn't want to have sex. I'm less attractive, whatever." And there's these spirals in your head, whatever. But I think having somebody turn around to you and say, "Oh, I really just love an amazing cuddle tonight," and just a kiss, and why don't we just kiss like we used to when we were teenagers? That'd be so amazing. But we know, like I say, it is the very binary. It's right. Okay,
Fair.
no, I don't want to have this thing where you kiss me, stroke my breast, and feel if I'm wet, penetrate me, and then that's it. Okay, I don't want to have that. I just want to have not just want to. I really feel like an hours long cuddle or massage tonight. How amazing would that be? And the partner, the guy, I would think, "Oh, wow, that'd be fabulous. That's different. That's great." But we don't have that dialogue. And it was something you said before about you talking to a client today about exploring fantasies and things. And I often think that I'm going to talk from a male perspective, I guess. We often don't express our fantasies for fear of how the other person's going to react.
Exactly.
Because the fantasy may well be, "Oh, I've always fantasized about sleeping with somebody else or whatever, or always fantasize about being submissive to you or whatever the things are." And we fear saying it because I think sometimes we fear saying it because we're not sure what the other person's actually going to hear. So you're saying you want to sleep with somebody else, therefore you don't find me attractive. What I might be saying is, wouldn't it be fabulous if we went away for a weekend to a hotel? I met you in a hotel bar, and I was Mr. Smith, you were Miss Jones. We didn't know each other, and that's having sex with a different person. Does that make sense? But my fantasy is something altogether different from actually what I want to happen in real life. And that's, I think, we're sort of nervous about saying it out loud because you think, "Gosh, is a partner going to judge us?" And sorry, this is a very long question. And one of the things I talked to somebody a few months ago. She's a dominatrix. She's so lovely, quite young, lives in Romania. She was fascinating, and she was saying a lot of the time men come to her, and it's not the physical act they're looking for. They just want to be able to submit for an hour, and they're fearful to say this to their wife or long-term partner for feeling that they always have to be the man and to be the dominant and things. But sometimes they're in a high-stress job or whatever, they just want to be submissive for an hour or two. So she gets that, and she says most of the time we're just talking. Really, very rarely do I ever take my clothes off. Actually, she doesn't know the thing. We're just talking, But you don't feel you can say it because, again, you're not sure how your partner's going to respond. So so if you have a couple listen to this that are in that situation, the guy's thinking, oh, I've got a fantasy, or the woman's thinking, I've got a fantasy, but I'm not sure how they're going to respond. How can you help almost the recipient of those words to actually not react straight, oh, you're so deviant, oh my God, I can't believe you think that, get away from me. How can you stop them, almost give them that space to sort of think, oh, okay, I wasn't sure about that, but yeah, that's interesting. How do you help people get to that place?
It's a great question. So I do some psychoeducation.
Okay.
I back it up with science.
Hmm.
I talk to them about a lot of people have fantasies, and uh, we all have fantasies. Not some people don't, but a lot of people do.
Hmm.
And so I liken it to dreams. So
Mm.
the first thing I'll say is if your partner comes in one morning and goes, oh, I had the craziest dream. And you go, tell me about it. And they go on and they tell you about this crazy dream. Do you say, well, that's an awful dream, or you shouldn't have had that dream,
Yes.
or you're sick for having that dream?
Mm.
No. Why? Because most people understand that dreams are our mind's way of kind of putting everything together and somehow maybe releasing some stress. It's imagination, right? So that's the premise. Understanding that also fantasies don't necessarily equal enactment.
Yes.
Meaning, not everyone wants to act out their fantasy. They just want to fantasize. It's their imagination place. So, sex is not also what we do. It's, as Esther Perel, my colleague, says, is a place we go. And I would add to that, it's a place where we can be someone we're not. Again, back to the kids and playing an imaginary play of, I want to be superhero, right? So, through our fantasies, we're living out all these dreams and fears and all of that. So I give that ground rules. First of all, so I give the education, and then I say to them, if you want to have this conversation, there are some ground rules here. The ground rules are that when your partner tells you something that seems new, different, or even um, you know weird to you, and it's not something you would ever imagine, you cannot make a face.
Hmm.
You have to have the discipline to not say anything or make an expression of disgust, disdain, aversion. Um, Otherwise, your partner will never feel safe enough to talk to you about this, right? And
Mm.
so those are the ground rules. You can't say ick, and you can't make a joke of it, because jokes can land as humiliation. And we all have enough of experiences growing up in society around feeling embarrassed or shamed or humiliated about the things that we want to do for pleasure. And so those are the ground rules. And if I think that couple is up for it, they've displayed this kind of self discipline and grounding, then we will have that conversation. I will sometimes not even, bring it up as a possibility because they're fighting, they're saying
Yeah.
nasty things to each other. They haven't done the work enough to actually that's kind of, advanced level work, I would say. So that's how I set up a very safe place. Um, and the science helps to normalize things too.
Hmm.
So there are big surveys done every year of people's fantasies, and there's some sort of very common fantasies that people report, whatever their
Yeah.
orientation is. And when they hear that, I don't know, 70% of people, I can't remember what it was, are fantasizing about group sex. They're like, really? Like, yeah. So then their anxiety goes down because they're like, oh, I'm not abnormal, right? The thing about sex therapy and training therapists is to understand that people come in and they just want you to they ask the question, am I normal? Is this normal? Am I
Mm.
okay? Right? And I'm not here to be the arbiter of what normal is. And I explain to them, I trust researchers and I trust the science. And like any good scientist, the results of any study have a bell curve. And at the top of the bell curve are the majority of respondents' answers. And that's what we call the average. And then on the legs of that bell curve are the outliers. That's the scientific name, right?
Mhm.
And so whether you're an average or you're an outlier, you should still feel, healthy and safe about
Mm.
yourself, and what your interests are. And they sit with that. And then I'll check in. How's your body doing? How did that land? I'm doing in-person sessions with people and I'm doing a lot of Zoom sessions with people. So I have to cross the bridge on the Zoom sessions because I'm not seeing their full body. And I'll just say,
Yeah.
what's going on? How did that land for you? Even just hearing me say that.
It's it's kind of frustrating in a way that we do want to be normal. And what I mean by that is normal can only be normal within a context. So some countries, people have five wives. Some cultures, people don't believe in having a partner that's just theirs, that they share the partner. We have polyamory. We have lots of different things. So you think, well, when you say, "Are you normal?" What do you mean? Are you normal for Manhattan, or is it being normal for Angola, or normal for the Amish community, or that's yeah. We sort of have this thing that we sort of strive to be normal. And I think one of the things you mentioned before was about people viewing different sorts of media and getting access to the information through different means. And I think that's one of the things that's changed a lot in the last, I don't know, 30 years or so, is that people can access pretty much anything they want to see on their smartphones, whatever. Whereas when I was a kid, it was a magazine that your older brother might have had that you might, oh my goodness, this woman's got her clothes on, oh my God. And that was the most exciting thing ever. Whereas now, that'd be kids seeing that now, we think, what? They wouldn't even think of it as being sexual at all. And I sometimes wonder whether that um, affects younger people more than we might expect. Whether it's in their expectations, do they expect that all women have no body hair, all women love to have more than one or two partners, guys all have an erection that's sort of 9 or 10 inches, that they can stay hard for hours and they can come gallons, etc. It's kind of scary if you watch that. I think, bloody hell, I don't look like that. My vagina lips and my vulva doesn't look like that. My labia are different. My penis bends to one side. My penis is smaller than that. Yeah, it must be kind of scary when you if that is your education as such. How do you yeah how do we help younger people to sort of recognize that it's entertainment in the same way that you watch the latest Mission Impossible film. Yes, Tom Cruise is flying off a cliff, but is on wires and cables and things. You're never going to do that. So, yeah, and I think sometimes people see that as almost a window into what happens generally, as opposed to it being scripted entertainment that's very, very different than you imagine in reality.
Yeah, well, I think you've answered that question, but the problem is that people still believe it. And the
Yeah,
problem is that our sex education really is quite minimal
yeah,
in most schools. And so there is this feeling like that's kind of the ultimate, that's the ideal, that's what you want.
yeah,
But I always say actually that pornography that's made for men by men is for the man's gaze. And so when they're entering a sexual experience, whether whatever the gender of their partner is, that's what they've been educated on, but it's not.
yeah.
And we all are very individual people and we all have different feelings and different wants and desires. And we also feel differently each day.
Mm.
And so I do think it's a shame that many people are using sexually explicit media, um, that for education instead of a good solid education. And so I would say the other thing is, the changes in the work that I've done over the last 25 years is that the online communities have at least helped some of the sexual minorities out there
Yeah,
to feel
absolutely.
less alone, which is huge
Yeah,
considering the mental health well-being we want all people
Yeah.
to have. So that's been an incredible revolution if you think about it,
Mm.
especially for people who are not living in urban centers where there are more people of different orientations and genders. The second thing I would say, though, is that despite all of the education out there, some of it is actually quite good and verified. Um, People still come in with these myths and belief systems because it's the first thing that they learned through osmosis or verbally from their families of origins and their cultures.
Yeah.
Even though, like, they're, and our clients at Center for Love and Sex in New York are quite well educated. They're professionals, most of them, and they still come in with these belief systems. And it's because it's what we learn. It's a belief. It's not, and so we have to do a lot of it. So, I always say I'm going to put my sex educator hat on now, and I'm going to tell you some things that are actually verified by science. Um, and then so we are doing education while we're doing either coaching or therapy in our practice and how I teach my therapists. You can't assume that someone understands their biology. You can't assume that. Um, Most people don't know the vast abilities that their body has in feeling pleasure. They don't.
Mm.
They haven't explored it. I sort of compare it to, we have these phones. Many of us have these iPhones that can do incredibly amazing things, but how many
I
features
know.
do we use, right?
Yeah. And they say the average person has like 85 apps and they use four. You use WhatsApp, the
Right,
camera, and that's probably about it, really. Like the phone's now got more power than in our first mission to the moon, but we certainly don't use that
right.
computing power for sure. Yeah, and I talked to a I'm not sure if she described herself as a therapist or not. Again, a few months ago, and she was saying that it's surprising how many women in particular have never looked at their vagina, their vulva, their labia in a mirror. They don't actually know what's going on down there. so which is, whereas a guy, you can generally see it. You can see it, and yeah, for women, we don't look at it and don't
Well,
don't explore it.
we live in a
It's
society that really denigrates the female body and genitalia in many cultures. And so there's a deep shame about that. And, I always, I guess because I'm the youngest in a large family, and
Mhm.
so I saw the women's movement from a very far away. But I profited from it because I knew what books to read when I was growing up. I
Yeah,
came from a liberal family. I had an older sister who took me on the subway to the medical center for women, uh, and she said to me, "When you're ready to have sex, here's where you're going to go to get protection and get educated." And here's how you get there, right? I had that kind of hands-on and open learning. Most females have already um, absorbed the message that their genitalia are ugly, they're too big, they're too smelly, they are too, it's disgusting, no one wants to go down there. um, Even the terminology we have for down there, like
yeah,
there's like this deep, place that you don't go.
absolutely. Yeah.
So there's a lot of unlearning in order to develop what this term that I coined is called sex esteem. It's a trademark
Hmm.
name. It's part of my model, and part of one of the pillars of it is confidence. If you don't have confidence and agency in your own body, and understand there are myriad different ways of the way vulvas look, then you're going to walk through life with shame and denial of your own feelings, which is really very sad. So we want to build people's sex esteem. We want to help them increase it, feel agency, feel gain this communication skills. To when a partner goes, I'm really into doing X, Y, Z. I'm really into going into I don't know, a sex party.
Mhm.
I'm really turned on by that. What about you? To be able to go, that's really interesting that you're into that. It's not my cup of tea.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad I'm speaking to someone from the UK. Because as a Canadian, like I have to
I
translate that for Americans. Not my cup of tea. And
Mm.
it's very neutral. It's not shaming.
Hmm.
It's very factual. And it's differentiating, which is a term that I use a lot with couples and partners. Because to learn how to differentiate means I'm not taking it personally that you're into that. Doesn't mean I'm less than.
Yeah.
And partner A, who said I'm into that, doesn't take it personally that his partner isn't interested in going.
Mhm. And I love that phrase, word, sex esteem. I was going to ask you about self esteem, but I think sex esteem is just such a much more productive, informed, and almost empowered word, if that makes sense. And I don't know why I hadn't really realized this. I was talking to some girlfriends recently, female friends, and we were talking about sort of sex, and they're talking about oral sex in particular. And a couple of them were sort of saying that they really can't relax when their partner's giving them oral sex. The partner thinks that they're doing a good thing. Oh, I'm going down there as well. I'm sort of, she gave me oral sex, she gave me head, so I better go down there. And they say they feel so uncomfortable with what's happening down there because they don't have that sex esteem. It's a perfect way to put it, and that they haven't thought about how much their partner might love doing that. And it's not that their partner's necessarily giving something to them; the partner's taking something from them as well. But I think that, yeah, yeah. How did you come up with that? I really like that sex esteem. Yeah.
I don't know. I just felt like when I got into this work and I
Mhm.
realized how disembodied people are and how shamed they are, and um, I don't know. I just felt like I had it because I been dead in my body and
Yeah.
shame and unshamed for so many years.
Mhm.
Um, and I realized sitting across from clients how much suffering they're going through. That I
Mm.
thought they really need agency. They really need confidence, communication skills, a sense of regulation so they don't react when someone else has
Yeah.
a different opinion or interest than them. And so that's just it came up. I just felt like, you know, so that is the term and that's the model. And I'm very proud of it. And
Mm.
I'm also proud of our program that Kelly and I started, the See It certification. So
Absolutely.
if any of your listeners are coaches or um,
Mm.
therapists and they want to learn, it's a virtual training. And we meet on the last Friday of every month in the afternoon. So it works for people at different time schedules. And we have people from all over actually in the program. So, which also is like an embarrassment of riches because we get people's different takes on
Yeah, definitely.
issues
Mm.
from their cultural standpoint, and
Mm.
it's really nourishing and enlivening intellectually.
Mm.
So yeah, yeah. So I love my work. I mean I get up every day and go.
I can sense that. I can sense that. And that was. I do want to ask you, and I'll take up a lot of your time, but just a couple more quick ones, if that's okay. Well, one of the things that I always feel for, and particularly, and I say people like you, particularly you, I think, is that you obviously hear and sit with, I'm sure, some traumatic comments from clients, some difficult situations, and that can be a really heavy weight that you're almost a bit like Atlas. You're sort of trying to move it around your shoulders of the world. How do you look after and nourish your own mental and physical well-being? Because you want to be able to be there for your partners, for your loved ones, for your clients. But if you absorb all of that trauma negativity, it must be so hard. How do you do that?
So I teach my therapists how to become more aware of their own self care and
Okay.
how to move through their. And I do believe that we hold everything in our bodies, and
Hmm.
so I do invite them to consider what physical activity are you going to be doing in order to move this stuff out and flush it out. So um, I know some of my therapists do martial arts. I'm a big yogi and dancer still. Yoga really does it for me. Um, if I don't have it, if I'm not running or lifting or doing some activity even for a week, I feel it. It's stuck inside me. It affects my mood. It's very sad. Some of the material we hear. I know a lot of people go, "Oh, you're a sex therapist," and they think it's very titillating. It's
Yeah.
not. It's actually very hard work, and you have to regulate it through your body. So some people meditate. I
Mhm.
train, my clients and my therapists. I invite them to take an MBSR course, which is mindfulness based stress reduction.
Mhm.
All of those techniques are a way to take time for yourself, and also go out and have some pleasure yourself. Right? We're trying
Yeah,
to encourage
absolutely.
our
Yeah.
clients to have so much pleasure, but are you allowing that in for yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's funny, isn't it? I think sometimes when people hear sex therapy, there's almost that sort of almost a giggle about, oh my gosh. But I'm guessing, well, people aren't really coming to you, I imagine. So, oh, we have the best sex life ever. We have our fantasies are fulfilled. We just want us to come and tell you. They're really not, are they? They're saying, we've thought about this for a long time. It's taken a lot of courage and persuasion, whatever, for both of us to come along here. Right, help us. And
yes,
almost
exactly.
throwing themselves at you. And I guess the first thing you have to explore with them is that you're the guide, facilitator, empowerer. But like so many things, whether it's physio, recovery after an accident, whatever, you've got to put the work in. You've got to do the homework.
Yeah.
We can't fix things in a weekly hour long session. So it's not because people aren't there to be fixed, are they? They're just there to be listened to, encouraged, and yeah, enabled. I think, and that yeah, I think must be a big thing of it. How you encourage people to do the work for themselves,
It's
really.
an excellent point, and one final thing I'll say as part
Yeah,
as being a great supervisor is to note when your therapist that you're supervising or your student is working too hard, and to give that feedback to them, because I
yeah,
see it often, especially earlier career therapists. They're doing all the work, and I'll say, I'm sorry, but what are your clients doing here? You seem so intent on doing,
yeah,
and actually, you're supposed to be guiding and inviting and observing, and then they're supposed to be active in the session as well. And it's an important life lesson as to be a good therapist,
mm,
to guide and lead and work, because I'm coaching people. I am being very directive and inviting to them. But
yeah,
if they don't take me up on it, there's only so much I can do. I can't fix your life.
yeah,
I can really inform and educate and support and encourage and invite and inspire. But at the end of the day, we're all left with our own lives.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a perfect place to end. Thank you so much. I'll put loads of links into the notes because there's so much. You give away so much information on your website, and there's so much there to help people and guide them and stuff. So yeah, and I would encourage therapists of all kinds to consider the See It program and just 'cause first of all, it's going to expand their repertoire of skills. It's going to help their clients get more from them, and it's just going to be something that's so important in so many lives. Give them more impetus to it. So yeah, thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you for joining us. You've been super super kind and yeah, really informative.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you, Andrew, for your really informed questions and insightful observations.